So last week we had the Treasurer visit the press club, and after 46 minutes, one side of the country looked at the other side of the country and said, "What was that?" And the other side of the country went,
Alan Jones said, "What was that?"
And Alan Jones and Ray Hadley and everyone was wondering, what was that? It was the weirdest speech that you could have had from a person who is central to creating economic plan and economic vision for the nation. But what stood out, apart from nothing in that speech, was this. He started reciting his friendship with some bloke called Clay Nelson from Texarkana, who's a Morrison mate. And I should have guessed why he'd be interested in this person. Apparently Clay and his hunting friends would play pranks, such as throwing alligators in each other's tents. It sounds just like the Coalition party room. No wonder these guys got on like houses on fire. And Clay would sit down with a client or a mate or a friend or whatever, and the first thing he'd say to you was, "How can I help you win today? How can I help you win today?" Which is probably what he said to Malcolm. And he said, and when I heard that for the first time, the first thing you did was recoil a bit as an Aussie and say, "That's a bit full on, that's a bit much. How does this guy, what does he really mean?" And now they've become great friends. And so then the Treasurer decided to channel Clay, and he had this thing about how he'd apply this to his job. Shadow Attorney General. He says, how can I back you in today? This is what Scott Morrison is saying to the Australian public. How can I back you in today? How can I, as Treasurer, how can the government back you in terms of what you are doing and what you hope to do? That's our job. What is this man? Is he Treasurer or Anthony Robbins? This is a weird approach. Will he deliver his budget speech in May? Will he deliver his speech in May? And at the end of the speech say, "Do you want a side of fries with that?" Is he going to upsize the budget at the end of it all? This is what we're expecting out of the Treasurer, that he'll have this sort of hokey, motivational speaking type approach, when really the person who needs motivation the most is the Treasurer himself. He's had the rug pulled out from under him. He spent the bulk of his time talking up a GST, which didn't happen. He's got no other options on the table. He looks at ours, rules them out, and then talks about thinking of how he'll bring them in himself, and that's all he's got. And he talks about how he can help us today. I'll tell you how he can help us today. Come up with a plan. Why don't you come up with some sort of idea to help the economy? Why don't you actually do things that help people? Here's an idea. Why don't you, for example, if you want to help people, make sure that we have education properly funded in this country. Make sure that our schools have a proper sense of funding instead of cutting everything. And when we went forward and said we would make sure, when the opposition leader announced that we would back in, we would do what that side of politics said they would do at the election, and we would fund every single school properly, why don't you do that? That's a plan in investing in the future of the nation, making sure we've got the skills we need and helping the economy grow. How about that as a plan? How about for communities that want better health care, that we don't have a whole lot of people that are forced to wait, sitting on the sidelines, forced to suffer and forced to endure substandard health systems? Why don't you actually invest in that? How about you help us by putting back the money you cut from schools and from hospitals? How about that as a plan? How about, for example, when government revenue's been undermined by the fact that multinationals are gaming tax systems all over the globe, how about you come up with a plan like we did to tackle that? A real one, as the member for Rankin says, which would deliver $7 billion in terms of additional revenue for this country. How about, for example, when we have wealthy superannuants who are on accounts of $2 million and they draw $75,000 a year, how about we wind back the concessions and deliver something that's fairer to people instead of ripping superannuation out of low and middle income Australia? How about that? If you want to help us, come up with a plan like Labor has. Like Labor has said, there are problems in this country that we need to be able to deal with, but the textbook, the playbook for that side of politics, is this. Whenever there's a problem in public life, there's one group of people that they'll turn to slug, and it's low and middle income Australia. It's not a plan whatsoever. You want to help us? Get out of the way and let Labor lead this country again.